David Niven. He's a professor at the University of Cincinnati. Professor, thank you for joining us this morning. Obviously, we want to talk about this very controversial rule from FIFA, breaking really with its own rules by suspending the red card to allow Balogun to play. Just how extraordinary is this move? Because something similar was made for Cristiano Ronaldo, allowing him to play. So what is different about this one?
So the diplomatic hijinks is really what's striking here. The assertion by Trump that he needs to be a part of the World Cup and the World Cup decision making is striking. And while there have been rare occasions when FIFA has rescinded, in effect, a penalty or its consequence, this one looks particularly hard to justify and as a giveaway to the host nation, and in a series of decisions that have been made to defer to Trump, with regard to the immigration rules that the US has imposed on this event, FIFA has not said a peep. They've just quietly accepted whatever the US has wanted to do, even though that defies, decades and decades of their practice.
So would you say if the same request had come from the president of, let's say, a smaller football nation with far less political influence than the U.S., would the outcome would have been different?
Well, it's hard to understand why they needed to intercede at all. This is a common part of the game, and certainly the look of it, deferring to the United States, deferring to the host nation, deferring after a series of really moments in which the U.S. has defied practice and tradition. And in fact, FIFA's contract, when a country agrees to host, they agree to effectively open their doors during the event to teams, to personnel, to referees, to fans. And the U.S. has absolutely not done that. So this red card reversal is part of that series of extraordinary deference. FIFA has really put it out as if the game comes first. But in this event, it's really the U.S. that's come first.
Yeah, so the U.S. president has openly confirmed that he called Gianni Infantino to ask for a review. How significant, first of all, is that admission? And should scrutiny fall on Gianni Infantino then? Because President Trump can make the call, but is FIFA obliged to make a decision to reverse the move?
Well, I think you're exactly right. For Trump, this is boasting. This is what he does all day long on virtually every issue. He likes to insert himself into virtually every issue, and he likes to pretend that every single issue bends to his will. Famously, during his first term, he once held a briefing on a weather event and redrew the forecast and changed which state the hurricane was likely to go to, believing that he could simply declare it that way. So for him, it's part of the way he behaves and operates. But for the leadership of FIFA, this is a really part of an ongoing embarrassment where they're going to have difficulty asserting their independence, asserting their fairness in the future, because they clearly were willing to do things for the U.S. that they weren't willing to do ever before for anyone else.
Okay. Professor, this is a little bit technical, but we're looking at the kind of rules here, the disciplinary code, right? So FIFA relied on this Article 27 of the disciplinary code to suspend Balogun's ban. How does that stand as a legitimate interpretation of the rules? And in the meantime, you've got the Belgian Football Association citing Article 66.4 of the code, which apparently makes a one-match ban automatic after a player receives a red card. So how do you reconcile those two provisions?
Well, the short answer is, FIFA's bylaws contradict themselves. And so, that gives them some wiggle room to rely on the article they would choose to rely on at any given moment. But it's not a good look. It may be within the scope of their confusing rules, but it doesn't look good. And what's extraordinary here is the last time they really did something exactly like this was more than 60 years ago, and they allowed a Brazilian player to play after a red card. But in that case, the diplomatic intervening was by other countries, not the country that was directly involved, but by its allies. So it looked a little bit less self-dealing, a little bit less self-interested in that case. In this one, again, if FIFA has rules that apply only when they want them to apply, then they don't really have rules at all.
And Professor, looking beyond this particular controversy, FIFA has also faced criticism over visa issues, ticket pricing, the fan access during this very tournament. Will FIFA's reputation ever recover? Would changing the leadership make a tangible difference? I mean, given the growing calls for Mr. Infantino to step down?
Well, I think a change in leadership is the very beginning of it. But, one of the things that's striking is FIFA presents itself two ways. One, that the game is first, that, this is the world's game and they represent the game. And two, they present themselves as, micromanaging. I mean, to the point where they renamed the stadiums where these games are taking place because they don't want any name that, contradicts their corporate imaging and branding. And so to assert themselves so strongly and then to retreat and really surrender on those immigration issues, surrender on this red card, it really does damage their credibility. And, you've seen previous host nations, Qatar and Russia, FIFA asserted itself and the rules were followed. The fact that they weren't able to pull that off with the United States really does damage their capacity to uphold their rules and it really does damage their world standing going forward for future World Cups.
Yeah, and just finally, as you said, the leadership is just the beginning of the kind of changes that FIFA needs. What else here does it need to kind of restore that credibility, restore the faith there that FIFA is still relevant today to preserve the most beautiful game?
Right. And that's the thing. They have to put the game first again, rather than their, personal relationships between FIFA leadership and the leadership of the United States. They have to put the game first. And what's really disappointing in this context is it's been a wonderful competition and the world has, seen for the first time nations that it's probably never thought of and certainly never thought of in the context of football. And this diminishes the accomplishment of a really extraordinary competition. And that's really FIFA's failure here. They let themselves get in the way of what would otherwise be an extraordinary set of games.
All right. We thank you for your time today, David Niven, the professor at the University of Cincinnati.